This is the last recorded lecture for chapter 23, and we had been, in fact, let's go back one. We had been talking about the two groups of angiosperms, the monocots and the eudicots. So this is a picture of a monocot flower. Notice that the flower, there are three petals, there are three sepals. These little green leaves under the petals are called sepals. And then these are the anthers. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 anthers. So the male flower parts called anthers, where the pollen is produced. These are in groups of 3. And then for our eudicot, and also look at the veins. Look at the veins on the flower petals and how they're kind of parallel, whereas they're netted here. And that's usually means for the leaf veins, but you can see it in the petals too. Petals are modified leaf structures. So then you can see the eudicot has 5 petals and 5 sepals underneath, but they're kind of blurry. But then there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 anthers. So flower parts vary in the monocot and the eudicot. And then the flower structures, sepals again, all together the sepals are called the calyx, and they protect the flower bud before it opens. The petals all together are called the corolla, and therefore attracting pollinators. The male part of the flower is altogether is called the stamen. The stalk is called the filament, and then the portion that produces pollen at the end of the filament is called the anther. The carpels are the female structure, and sometimes they're also called pistil, P-I-S-T-I-L, pistil. So the female structure is called the carpel, and it contains the stigma, which is the tip of the stalk, and it has a sticky end. I always remember stigma and sticky, because this is where the pollen will attach, it will stick to, and then a pollen tube will grow to the ovary. But the carpel is the stigma, the style, which is the stalk, and then the ovary, which grows into the fruit. And this is a picture of a flower and all the different flower parts. So you've got all of the petals together are the corolla, all of the sepals are the calyx, and then you have for the male parts, they're called the stamens. The tip is the anther, the stalk is the filament, and the female part, the tip is called the stigma, and the style, and then the ovary, and inside the ovary is the ovule. So the pollen tube has to grow to the ovule during pollination. The life cycle of flowering plants, they are heterosporous. That means they produce 2 types of spores. A megaspore is located in the ovule, which is the female spore. It develops into the female gametophyte called the embryo sac, and that's important because I told you the male gametophyte was the pollen grain. This is what the female gametophyte actually is. It's the embryo sac. So the embryo sac is the female gametophyte of a flowering plant. There are usually 7 cells within the female gametophyte. 1 is the egg. 1 contains 2 polar nuclei. And then there are 5 more cells that I won't say they don't matter, but we're not going to really talk about what they do. The microspores, which are the male structures, are produced within the anthers, and they develop into pollen grains, which again is the mature male gametophyte, and they contain the sperm. The pollen grains have 3 cells. They have a tube cell, and that cell grows into a tube. And then they have 2 sperm cells. So what happens during pollination of a flowering plant is a process called double fertilization. And that's because there are 2 sperm cells. And we'll talk about what they do. So double fertilization involves 1 sperm uniting with the egg, and that's going to form the diploid zygote. So that will become the embryo within the seed. The other sperm is going to unite with one of the polar nuclei, and that's going to form the endosperm, which will be the food for the embryo. And it's triploid, which means it has 3 copies of chromosomes rather than 2, because the polar nuclei have 2 nuclei, and then the sperm has 1, so that's 3 nuclei together. The ovule will develop into a seed. It will contain the embryo and the endosperm, and it will be enclosed within a seed coat. So it will contain the embryo, which will become the sporophyte of the next generation, and then the endosperm will become the food for the embryo. Again, a fruit is a ripened ovary. And this shows you the life cycle of a flowering plant, including the process we know as double fertilization. These are some terms that you might want to know for flowers. If a flower is called complete, it has all 4 parts. It has sepals, petals, stamens, and carpels. If it's incomplete, it only has some of these parts, but not all 4. If it's perfect, then it has both stamens and carpels. In other words, both male structures and female structures. But if it's imperfect, it has either stamens or carpels, but not both. So you can have, let's say, you can't have an imperfect complete flower. If it's complete, then it's perfect, if that makes sense. But you can have an incomplete perfect flower. That means it has both stamens and carpels, but it lacks one of the other parts. Or you can have an incomplete imperfect flower that has all the parts except it only has stamens or carpels. So these are just terms that you might, want to be familiar with. Inflorescence means that the flower is, you see it as a cluster of flowers, and composite means it appears to be a single flower but consists of a group of tiny flowers. So just different flower terminology, and that is it.